Hello, everybody, and welcome back to IndieQuest, the celebration of the indie and obscure. Your home for all indie video game talk. We love to sit down and chat about why we love this amazing art form together. My name is Josh, and I'm here with my co-host and the champion of the Gungeon. I think that's what I called you last time, right?
Yeah.
Seth, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and as I said on the last episode, I was missing the Gungeon more than I thought, because I actually did run through the Gungeon a couple times this week, and I didn't like beat tweet it or anything, but I threw some credits in the Discord because I was so proud of myself after not played that game in 3-4 months, and just being able to run through it felt pretty sweet. So yeah, thank you, Josh, for reminding me of my long lost love.
It's like riding a bike, right? You just remember how. Yeah,
I will say the first couple rooms were a little rough. I had to kind of adjust my hands to remember kind of how to play. But once you get back in that rhythm, it all comes flowing back. So
that's awesome. I'm glad I can inspire you at least a little bit every once in a while. So that's good.
For sure.
And I just wanted to say, to start off the episode, really, congrats to Steve and his partner, Leah. They had their baby, so that's why you're not hearing his dulcet tones right now. So congratulations.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully, I imagine both of them will listen. Congrats, buddy. Congrats, Leah. And excited for you. Missing you, but I know you guys have definitely got your hands full. So hopefully, Josh and I can bring some real Steve energy on this one.
Oh, we got to bring something that no one's ever heard of, but it's somehow the best game that you've ever played.
But it's also a side quest game?
Yeah, it's also a side quest game somehow.
Yep.
All right, well, another thing that's not as important, or maybe not even as interesting, happened last week. The Nintendo does these Nintendo Indie Directs every once in a while, so they bring, a good selection of games, and I feel like we usually just like to pick a few that we're kind of like, that kind of, scratches that itch for us in the event here. This one had like a little over 20 games. So any of them stick out to you specifically?
I had 2 of them stick out to me. There were a lot of like puzzly, almost simulation type games that I am usually not a huge fan of. Not that I wouldn't check them out, but they don't immediately draw my attention unless I'm looking for something different. So I had 2 games, one of which our listeners might guess that I'm interested in. The other one, maybe not so much. So why don't you lead us off with what you saw?
Yeah, I was looking at this game called OxenFree 2. That's one that I just scrolled by. That's the one I should shout out first, because I'm just looking forward to the continuation of the story. I don't know what they're going to do with it, because it's one of those where the first game in the series had like so many permutations for the ending. I don't know if they're going to go off of the ending and have the same characters, or if it's a new group of characters, or what that's going to be about. But this trailer was just exactly what I expected it to be, and it looks just more of the same, but definitely looks like it has some artistic improvements, at the very least. So looking forward to that. I think it's going to come out in August, so definitely excited. Oh no, July 12th. That's when it's coming out. Here it is. Awesome.
Funnily enough, when I was watching, before they had actually announced what that game was, I was like, oh, this game looks pretty cool. And I never even wrote it down or even made a note of it once I found out it was OxenFree 2, because I was like, oh, Josh is definitely going to talk about that one.
Yeah, I think it's just that weird, eerie, atmospheric kind of sci-fi horror. You don't really get it too often in video games, and I think they just nailed it with the first one. I think when I talked about the first one, I had some issues with some pacing for the backtracking. Maybe they'll improve on that for the sequel. That'd be nice. But besides that, it looks really cool. I'm excited. Anything stick out to you here in this beautiful Nintendo indie world?
Yeah, I will touch on a game that I have played in the past is getting a sequel. I have not brought it to IndieQuest. I think I've just been waiting for a special time or something to kind of dip my toe back into it. Maybe go for like more of a 100%, because I didn't 100% it the first time. But Blasphemous 2 is going to be released. I didn't even catch exactly what the dates were that these were releasing, but I am very interested in that game for a lot of reasons. I feel like in comparison to the first Blasphemous, it looks a lot more polished, and which is kind of weird because I feel like the first one also was really well done in like the graphics department and the art style. But this one just seems to like jump off the screen. And I think part of that is because the first one was very dark, very gothic, very gray and red, mostly because of the blood and just the darkness of it all. And this one is almost going in a very bright at times. It still looks like there's plenty of blood. I think it's still going to lean that direction, but like there's lots of blues and yellows, and like it's almost like they're outside a lot more, right? The penitent one is outside, and you're playing in a more vibrant locations compared to the first one, which I'm very interested in because I like when the backgrounds are a little bit more varied. So yeah, that one looks really cool.
Right. You know what it reminds me of? The art style, the shift. Oh, by the way, it's summer. They just said summer window. They didn't say a date for that one,
cool.
Just so you know.
Yep.
It reminds me of Axiom Verge versus Axiom Verge 2, because the first Axiom Verge is like a lot of blacks and stark colors, and then like the sequel was all about like beautiful landscapes and things. I feel like the developers like have a good idea for a game, and then when they get that idea for a sequel, it's like, let's like make the art crazy awesome because we have the money and time to do a really good sequel. Right. I feel like that's the effect there on that one. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a game really up your alley for sure, I would say. The first one was, at least. I played some of it, and it didn't grab me, just to be honest. I love the art style and the music was really good, but I played some. I was like, yeah, this is okay. You know, it didn't really grab me, but maybe we'll talk about it on another IndieQuest, which would be nice someday here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would love to bring it and talk. I'm not sure that Steve has played it at all, and it's a pretty popular game, right? But yeah, I'd love to bring it and have a chat with you guys and see what your overall thoughts were and things like that. So, did you have another game that you were interested in?
Yeah, last but not least, this has been announced for a while, but we never knew like even really a release window before now. It's the spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio Future and Jet Grind Radio. It's called Bombrush Cyberfunk. So this is an indie developer team. Like, I don't even know the size of the team, but it's a super small team making this, and they're pretty much trying to make a modern Jet Set Radio with modern controls, with modern sensibilities and modern music, which, you know, to me just checks a bunch of boxes. Like, one thing for like past and like those games, the Jet Set Radio and stuff, I like them. I feel like the controls were just a little like floaty, kind of hard to grasp, at least at first. You kind of get used to them, a little janky, I would say, maybe. Maybe what I'm thinking with this one, when I'm watching the gameplay and it just looks so clean and like crisp for like, you know, just an indie published game, I'm hoping they take like modern sensibilities with the controls and the way the game feels. I feel like that's the thing I'm kind of like curious about the most, you know, when it comes out. But they have a release date now. It's August 18th. If you haven't seen a trailer, check it out. It's called Bombrush Cyberfunk, and the art style and music alone will probably sell most people, I think.
Yeah, that one definitely looked interesting. I was never a big Jet Set Radio fan, I guess, because Jet Set Radio came out on the Saturn, right? Is that correct?
Dreamcast and then Xbox original.
Dreamcast, right. So I never had those any Sega consoles when I was growing up, and I didn't have an Xbox either. I had all Nintendo stuff mostly, other than a PS1. So I never got into that stuff, but I do like the art style. I do like, I guess I always likened it to something like Tony Hawk or something. I don't know if it plays like the Tony Hawk games at all, but it always kind of reminded me of like a more vibrant, more colorful Tony Hawk game. And that certainly interests me.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that the controls are different. I would say it's more like arcadey pick up and play than Tony Hawk can be, because Tony Hawk's all about comboing and things like this. That, you know, this one's more kind of like fluid movement and things. They have tricks you can do, but it's not like, let's remember like combos in my head, like which, you know, up, down, down does what or whatever. So it's more about the vibes, the music. and having fun skating around like very vibrant places. So, sounds like a game up my alley, and hopefully it turns out as good as the trailers look. So, yeah. What is your second game here? You had one more, right, for us?
My last pick for the games that were actually in that video would be Animal Well. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
It's mostly because it really piques my interest more than anything. I mean, it looks like a classic platformer, but I love that ZX Spectrum look, like with that CRT filter over top. Like, it looks very interesting. And I really want to check that game out. More than anything in that video, that game really interests me. So what did you think of that game?
Oh, yeah. It's a fun fact. It's by, Donkey on YouTube.
Oh,
it's
yeah. Oh, yeah, I did. I saw
it.
him show up in that video.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's cool. That's interesting. But besides that, the art style is very striking. Like, it is, 8-bit, with, like you said, the ZX Spectrum style, but like, that's kind of underselling it just to say that. Like, I feel like the graphics really pop, and it looks like it has really smooth and fluid gameplay too. So yeah, definitely one on my radar too.
Yeah, I can't wait to check that one out, because it's very rare that an art style or a graphical style hasn't been done before. And I can't really think of something that at least has not been like the mainstream or in the public eye, like that one obviously is now. Where we're going to really get to see something like that, right? So I'm very excited for that. So,
all right. Well, if you guys haven't checked it out, go to Nintendo's Indie, Nintendo's YouTube, everything. Almost said Indie profile. That doesn't make sense. Nintendo's YouTube profile, and check it out. I'm sure that most people that listen to this have actually checked it out. And if there's any games that you're interested in from that, you can send us an email. We'll read it on the show and have a conversation about it. So that's IndieQuestPod@gmail.com. It's always open for any conversation.
Awesome. Well, I think that is going to lead us right into talking about a couple of indie bangers, Josh. So,
oh yeah,
do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? I'm putting it on you this time, not letting you try to throw it at me.
All right, I think I will go first this time, because let you have that nice, like, lead us out. I think you like that. No, I don't know. This game's pretty short, and it's kind of like pretty easy to talk about. So, there's a game that came out 2019. It's a little side-scrolling game. It's an action, fast, score-based game with frying pans and skateboards and a talking banana. The game is My Friend Pedro. Have you played this game?
I have not. I think that I've only heard of this game. I've definitely heard of it, but I don't remember seeing. I probably have seen screenshots, but I cannot recall any. But why don't you give us a little overview of what it's about?
So, My Friend Pedro is a side-scrolling action bullet time game. So basically, you're a dude who's dual wielding like Uzis or pistols, whatever, and you're going through various warehouses and things, killing dudes in slow. You basically can slow down time when you do flips and dives. So it's basically a lot of diving through a window, slowing down time, shooting two dudes real quick, jumping on a skateboard, skating away, doing a couple flips, and then doing it again. So it's a lot of like trying to chain together various combo things to get like higher tier ranks for the stages too. Kind of like an action game would have, like DMC or something like that. And it's really fun. I do think that the gameplay itself is very addicting, and it has that, Katana Zero, Hotline Miami, you die and you just restart right there, redo the room over and over again type of vibe. You got like a cool like roll, like almost Samus roll, and then you can wall jump and do flips in the air, kind of do very like stylistic, action scenes. You feel like John Wick or some action star, when you play it. And I think the main thing I would say for this game is just it just nails that feel. You just feel like a badass when you're going through these rooms.
It's funny that you said Katana Zero, because I'm looking at a few screenshots. It doesn't look like Katana Zero from a graphical standpoint. It's much more polished, like seems really well done in the graphics department. But that is the first thing I thought of when I saw some of these screenshots and like how the gameplay looks without seeing video is Katana Zero. It looks like a building is cut in half and your character is running through it and fighting every enemy that they see, right? So
yeah, it's very much that you're the one man unstoppable machine just mowing down dudes, and you have literally the storyline in this game I think really adds a lot to it. Like you feel powerful. You also know that you're playing an insane protagonist or just somebody who has some type of voice in his head telling him to do the things he's doing, and then it just happens to take the shape of a banana named Pedro, which is ridiculous. But it's Devolver Digital, so you kind of expect that style of like really like adult humor in there too. There's a lot of jokes like that. But yeah, besides that, like you said, the art style is like a 2.5D, so don't go in thinking pixel graphics. It's actually rendered out. Like you said, half buildings cut through it and you're running through mowing down dudes, and like I think that it's a very aesthetically pleasing game. There's a lot of like really cool areas you go into, and they do a really good job with the lighting, and I think that there are moments where you are shooting dudes and you get some dismemberment too. You can so there's a frying pan. I mentioned that at the beginning. You can get a frying pan. You can basically slow down time, kick a frying pan to ricochet bullets back to the guy who shot you or his friend. And you can also use it to kick this frying pan into somebody's head and make their head explode. So it's pretty much like do the craziest and most carnage you possibly can do. And there is a story. It's kind of just off the rails, like already just my description, I'm sure you can tell. But yeah, like I think for the most part, it's a pretty solid package for what you're getting into. But yeah, have any comments on it or any thoughts?
It looks super interesting just from what I've seen and what you've said, and the way you describe it and the different kinds of weapons and the different ways to kill people. It reminds me even more of Katana Zero. Obviously, it's much more insane in terms of like what's going on and the banana and everything, but
right.
we might you haven't even gotten to the quest log yet, and we might be seeing this on a second opinion in the future, because for two reasons. It seems like it's going to scratch that itch that I enjoy out of games like Katana Zero, and it was a Devolver Digital published game, and I love me my Devolver, and that is certainly where I've seen it before, because I've looked at all the majority of Devolver games, right?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it looks extremely interesting. It does make me wonder, though, how it sounds, because so much of Katana Zero is in that music. I love that soundtrack. So what's the soundtrack like?
It's actually pretty varied. There's a lot of techno-y music, which you would think, but there's actually some really good, just general electronic music in it, I would say. I would say this would be one of those you could throw the back music on in the background and have a good time type of soundtrack. I don't know if any of the specific tracks stick out to me specifically, but it's definitely that Devolver Digital, like the music's gonna rock. You're gonna want to crank up your headphones and kick some ass type of vibe. So yeah, definitely a very solid soundtrack.
See, whenever I see anything published by Devolver, you always kind of know, I guess, except for like Piku Niku or something like that.
Right.
But the majority of Devolver games are kind of balls to the wall, mayhem, carnage, craziness, and you know what you're going to get out of it, and they're all good. Like, you're always going to get a good experience when you play those games. So that really has me watering at the mouth for this game.
Yeah, so pretty much you're going to get, with a Devolver game, you're going to get at least an 8 out of 10. That's what I would think. You know what I mean? Like,
I agree.
You might even get like a 10 out of 10 sometimes, I don't know if this is a 10 out of 10. I do think that there are times where it's like, okay, maybe I didn't combo this room specifically. I'm a little frustrated by the movements. I was playing some just to refresh myself because it had been a little bit since I played this. And I was like, oh yeah, there's a couple of times when you're not as familiar with the combos that you can mess up. But that's any game with a system where you're trying to chain things together. You'll get better the more you play it. So it's kind of like, yeah, the gameplay is great. I don't know. I think I'm just talking in circles now. I'll just go ahead and throw it on the quest log. Right here, I do think this is kind of like teetering between a main quest and side quest for me. I think because it is a solid package for what you get and the time it is. It's only like a 2-hour game, 2.5 if you like go back and like try to get S tier on things. You probably can get maybe even 3 or 4 hours out of it, trying to get good scores on everything. I'm not even sure if it unlocks anything special for the good score, but it might. But there's people who just want to S tier everything anyway because that's the type of gamer they are. That's going to be a fun game for you because you can beat it in 2 hours and then you can just, try the stages out again, try to perfect your runs and try to see how good you can actually get and master those controls. So for me, it's going to be a main quest game. And I did think about this a lot. I was like, yeah, I could say it's a side quest game because, it's kind of shorter and this and that, but just talking about it and thinking about it more and more, I'm like, yeah, this is a game I would pretty much recommend to anybody if you're in the mood for this style of game.
Well, do you know what you said it's about 2 hours. What's the price or value proposition of this game, I guess?
I can look it up real fast. Oh. I don't think it's a very expensive game. I think it was on Game Pass when I played it back in the day.
Oh, that makes sense.
It might be on it right now too, actually. I just played it on Xbox.
Well, anything on Game Pass, I guess it really, as long as it stays on Game Pass, it really doesn't matter, right? At that point, as long as you have Game Pass, you're good to go. So
it's MSRP is $20. I would say try to get it for maybe 10 to 15 if you don't have Game Pass, but you'll get your fun for 20. But it's kind of at that point, it's like you probably want to try to get a little more time out of it and master the levels, like I was saying, get the S tier and all that to try to get that extra little bit of value out of it. But
right.
$20 isn't too bad for a game, like it'd be solid for that. Yeah. Well,
it looks extremely well polished too, right? Like
right. Yeah.
That costs money. Like you're looking at these 2.5D background landscapes and everything they got put into it, and it's just extremely vibrant, and that takes money and time. So even if it is a short game, that's of cost something, right?
You're gonna see some sense. Like if you do play the game, you're gonna see some more like parallels to Katana Zero, because I was thinking about some of the scenes in it. I don't know if I want to mention it. There is a very similar action set piece moment in this game that you're gonna be like, oh yeah, okay, Josh was talking about that, because you'll recognize it if you do play it. But yeah, it's very similar in style in lots of respects, I would say. So honestly, if you like Katana Zero and you will kind of want something, it's not exactly the same, but has the same kind of energy, I would say check that one out.
Awesome. I am definitely going to in the future, and perhaps at some point in the future, we will be hearing about it again on this very podcast, because this is right up my alley. And
yeah,
I played Katana Zero off of your reference to it and glowing review of it, and you gave a pretty glowing review of this one as well. So yeah, I am going to check it out.
I would say it's in the same vein. So I think you'll dig it. I'm sure you'll have a good time with it. So awesome. That was my friend Pedro. You can get that on almost any platform. Seth, what you got for me today? What awesome game did you bring to the quest log?
Well, I was, as I typically do, I tried to kind of cross between the indie sphere and also dance with that polykill challenge. And
there you go.
As everyone knows, probably most people know who listens to this, the polykill challenge for this year is to play a game that starts with a different letter of the alphabet, right? And also a number at some point. Well, there are a few letters out there that are more difficult than others. Obviously, there's lots of R's, S's, T's, things like that. But H is a little bit more difficult. There are plenty of H games, but a little bit harder to come by, especially when it comes to my tastes. So I perused the Steam sale about 2 weeks ago now when I was looking for something to play, and found a little game called Haiku the Robot. Yeah, so Haiku the Robot actually came out September 9th, 2022. It was developed by Mr. Morris Games, and unlike my friend Pedro, it is not on a whole bunch of platforms. It's actually only on, from what I could tell, PC and Mac, and then on Switch. So anybody who wants to achievement hunt this time cannot do it in the trophy variety. You're going to have to pick it up on the old Steam or just enjoy it handheld on your Switch. But overview of this game. It is a 2D Metroidvania styled, and I hope I don't repeat this too many times. Josh, give me a virtual tap on the head if I do. But it is very similar to Hollow Knight. And I mean very similar. And we'll get into some of that as we go. But
is it artistically similar, really, though? Or is it more video gamey?
Gameplay-wise, it is extremely similar to Hollow Knight. And I'll get into that right now. So you play as a robot named Haiku, like the poem. You do sword attacks in 4 different directions with this like golden sword. You're not entirely sure what it is. I think you find out later that it's like a computer chip. You can learn several skills as you typically do in Metroidvanias. You can dash, you can wall jump, you can turn into a morph ball a la Metroid and kind of go through the walls and things like that in the smaller passageways once you find that. I want to mention right now that the movement and combat and control is extremely slick, like very, very smooth. This is... going to compare it to Hollow Knight right now, but it took great inspirations from Hollow Knight, and it did a good job in a lot of those areas. I think if you're going to copy something, you better do really well at it. And when it comes to combat and gameplay, Haiku does a very good job of kind of replicating that experience that you kind of got from Hollow Knight. And I think the developers clearly had an inspiration and they went with it. And in terms of gameplay, they definitely knocked it out of the park. So,
awesome.
As you travel through the game, you're defeating enemies, of course, and they drop, and sometimes you can also find them hidden around the world, but you actually find these things called spare parts, which is your currency. They are used in multiple different ways. You can buy items with them, such as chips, which are very similar to charms in Hollow Knight, where you can actually attach them to Haiku and power up different aspects of him in combat and things. You can buy capsule fragments, which are like heart pieces in Zelda, right? You get 3 of them and combine them all together, and you get an extra heart container or capsule container in this case. Every time you take a hit, you lose one of those containers until you take however many you have, and then you die and reset from your last save point. You can also, which this is the one thing that is quite unique, I think, about Haiku, the spare parts are also used to heal yourself. So very early on, you find, or maybe you had it the whole time, I can't exactly remember, but you have a wrench that you use he basically cranks like his belly area every time if you want to get some health back, he cranks like his chest and heals, but it takes an amount of time to heal it up, right? So in Hollow Knight, as the vessel, you can focus, right? Like you focus hard and you kind of drain some of that soul energy.
Similar to like a flask, Estus flask or something, right?
Yes, like a flask. Yep. And it slowly heals up. Like there's a little white dot that starts very small and gets a little bit bigger until it's full. And then you have effectively healed off that point of damage, right?
Nice.
I found myself that every time, especially when I was just platforming and going through the world, I would heal a point every time I lost one because there was very little reason not to. All it was doing was spending maybe 10 to 15 of your spare parts, and I usually had an abundance of them. So in that way, and I'll get to this more later on, it is a pretty easy Metroidvania for the most part. Now, we'll get to some boss stuff here in a little bit, but in general, traveling through the world, it's pretty frictionless. You're going to get hurt, but in most cases, you're going to be able to heal right back up and be full health most of the time. So, speaking of traveling through, there's a map, of course, like every Metroidvania, and you unlock like giant sections of it by finding these robot things hidden within the areas, and they give off this like black pulsating thing, so you know that within the room you're currently in, there is one there if you see that black pulsating thing coming out, and then you just have to like follow wherever that's coming from and hit it a bunch of times until it unlocks the map. And it's very satisfying. There's a lot of different ways that people will allow you to unlock the maps in Metroidvania games, but I really found this one to be satisfying because it rewards the exploration and trying to find that thing to be able to do that. And then once that happens, you feel like you've completed something, even though you haven't completed that section of the map yet. Right. But it is very cool.
It's kind of like the map guy in Hollow Knight also, where you find him and then you can upgrade your map and, put more icons on the map if you have a certain amount of points and all that. Sounds similar, but I know people are frustrated by that sometimes in this type of game, but that does sound very rewarding to like have to do like a little kind of mini game to go get him real quick, follow him and kill him. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Right.
This thing is stationary, so it just sits there. Okay. It's like a pedestal. But I mean, it is still fun. It is still fun to find. And realistically, they could have made it a button or something, but they make you hit it like 7 times. And it's satisfying because then once it breaks, it gives you a pop-up that says, oh, this portion of the map is completed. And then you can press the map button and then it kind of like slowly opens up and you're like, yeah, I did a thing. So I don't know. I enjoyed it.
Basically just feel
accomplished. Yeah. You eventually find a train, like a train station. You walk through this little turnstile and then a train comes and that's your way of fast traveling. And I know that you've played a little bit of Hollow Knight, Josh, but it's also very similar to the form of fast travel in that game. There's like a little bug thing that comes in Hollow, or like a big bug thing, I guess, that takes you to the different points all over the map.
Right. Yeah.
This is very similar.
I think I played about half of Hollow Knight, honestly. I should just go back and play the rest. But I don't know. You know how it is.
Highly encourage it. Yeah, for sure. I think that we'll be talking about it at some point in the future. So whenever we get there, definitely. Josh, we'll force you to. So
yeah, that's true. That's a good idea. It's like, let's do an episode about it. Force Josh to just sit there with Clockwork Orange, eye pry open, all that stuff. Yep. Anyway.
Exactly.
All right, go ahead.
Enemies are very fun and varied. Lots of different attacks. You kind of, once you find an enemy and see its attack, you kind of know what they all do, but there's still like that trial and error learning when you first encounter them. Bosses are extremely Hollow Knight-like, like to a point where certain ones of them seem almost like carbon copies of different bosses that I've experienced in that other game, but it doesn't mean they're at all bad. Like, I enjoyed every boss for what it was. Certain ones of them still took a decent amount of tries to overcome. I will say, while we're talking about bosses, there were certainly bosses in Hollow Knight that took me several tries, over 10 tries. I don't think there's a single boss in Haiku that took me more than maybe 3, and I think probably 75-80% of the bosses that I encountered, I beat first try. So another point to this is not a very difficult Metroidvania, and is certainly more beginner friendly than something like Hollow Knight if you're trying to get into Metroidvanias and you don't want a very difficult experience. So
right. So maybe like play this before Hollow Knight. Play this, see if this is kind of your flavor, and if you like it, maybe step up the difficulty to Hollow Knight, right? That would be a good way to do it.
Yeah, that is definitely one way to do it. Or
Right.
if you have played Hollow Knight and bounced off of it because of the difficulty, I would highly suggest you and anyone to check out Haiku, because I think it's a better bridge of that gap than Hollow Knight is. Like, Hollow Knight really will punish you if you're not skilled enough at video games, I guess, right? Like, I would never say, "Oh, your fourth game ever? Go play Hollow Knight. I'm sure you'll love it."
Right.
Like, that's just not ever going to happen. So
true.
that will lead us into presentation, though. As you were saying, Josh, you looked up a screenshot perhaps and asked about whether it looked like Hollow Knight. I would say that it certainly has vague similarities in the layouts and things, but Haiku looks much more like, I would call it, a very pretty Game Boy Advance game. That's what it looks like to me. It almost looks, like a portable game, except for, I've already talked about the controls, but it controls unlike any Game Boy Advance. Like, it could, no GBA could ever do what this game does. It is extremely slick, extremely smooth. However many frames your computer can possibly handle, it can run, right? So that's never going to be the case. Initially, I thought it was going to be very gray and almost rust-like in some of the colors and presentation from that standpoint. But
that's how the trailers almost sell it, though. Like, when you look at a trailer, it's like all gray. That's what you see. Yeah,
and it's extremely, everything is like robotic, right? So, I mean, that is the point. There's all kinds of robots that you're fighting all the time, and you're a robot. Everything is a robot. Like, there's no, there is, I shouldn't say that. There is some living things within the world, but for the most part, 98% of everything is mechanical. So that initially, I think that's kind of draws you in. Like, if you want that mechanical feel, then this is going to be great for you. But I will say, every single area, I was talking about breaking open those robotic pedestals things to uncover the map. If you want to have varied environments, you will get them. So just wade through the first area or two, and you will get to much more colorful environments than what is you're initially presented with. To me, it almost seems like every single area has its own theme in terms of a color. So
that honestly feels like Hollow Knight too, because when you first start Hollow Knight, it's like all caves, and then it's just like beautiful, lush, beautiful greenness, after a little bit. So I don't know. Well, my question, actually, I have just a question in general for you. How do you feel about people who are, so like this type of situation goes on where somebody is so inspired that you can almost see like hints and glints of the other game in it? Do you like that, or does that turn you off from a game? Like, does that bother you at all?
I will. So some of this is going to come into my verdict, but I think initially when I first started playing this game, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a Hollow Knight ripoff. It's insane. Like, just personal opinion, being subjective and not objective right now. I was like, oh man, this is so apparent what they were going for here. But I kept playing it and I kept playing it. And I personally, if you're going to shut off the podcast right now and go do something else, I'm going to say that if you enjoyed that type of experience that you get from Hollow Knight and other Metroidvania games, you should play Haiku. So before I get to the verdict and kind of do my grand comparison, it is good enough to see past its inspirations, I will say. So is that hopefully that answers your question?
Yeah, I did. That, I mean, I honestly love that type of thing where you can kind of see the hints, and especially if it's something you like.
Right.
It's a good example, like Chia, the one that Steve just brought. Yep. It's very, very inspired by Breath of the Wild. Like, I was playing some Chia, and I'm like, yeah, this is Breath of the Wild. This is a Breath of the Wild ass game right now.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, and that's perfectly fine with me because I like Breath of the Wild. So, sometimes the inspiration's on its sleeve, but they make it its own thing, which sounds like Haiku did. So, there you go.
Yes, for sure. So, moving on with the story,
Mhm.
As with most of these kinds of games, it definitely plays second fiddle to the gameplay. You learn early on that there's basically a virus that has taken over all of the mechanical beings within the world, right? So something's happening to them, and you're a robot that didn't get taken over. So go figure it out, right? That's kind of the overarching story in a nutshell. I will say that there are some amazing NPCs that you meet throughout. And because of that, it's that old saying where it's more of the journey and not the destination, at least for me, because the ending is fine. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the story, but I, much more than that, enjoyed meeting different NPCs along the way. Like there is this, I can't remember, like I'm so bad with names. There's a detective robot named Limerick, and he's really cool. But you meet a toaster because it's basically everything mechanical, right? So you
Right.
meet a toaster. His name is Splunk, I believe it's Splunk. And such a great character. You watch this toaster go through the world and struggle to do the things you're doing. At one point you have to help him because he fell. Like it's so good in that way. So I would say if you want some grand adventure story, you're not going to get it here, but it's well worth it to experience all of the different characters you meet along the way.
Yeah, it sounds charming. Like
Yes.
the way you're describing, like the whole experience is like you're having a nice time, meeting some cute characters, fighting some fun bosses. Nothing's too hard or too much friction in the gameplay. It's like, just a nice chill Metroidvania. That's what I'm getting from your explanation here.
Yes, I would say that is definitely the case. Although I'm going to get into it right now with music.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually a little bit darker, which honestly is again kind of like Metroidvania. It's not a hard game. It is a pretty chill experience, but it's a fairly dark atmosphere and mood, I guess. Like nothing, because everything is infected by this virus and basically all the robots are dying. So it is it's chill gameplay wise, but the little bit of story that is there is kind of morbid in a way,
it's kind
right?
of dire.
So,
yeah, it sounds more dire than I was led to think. Yeah,
right. You're absolutely right that it is a pretty chill experience compared to a lot of different games, but it doesn't put you in a chill mood like something like Omno. It doesn't do that, right?
Right, definitely. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I would say that the music is probably the weak point of the game, but
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, but there are several tracks in there that are really good, and I would certainly listen to on their own. There is a foresty area that I love, which reminds me of Green Path from Hollow Knight, but it's a great theme. The train theme, because there's like several people on the train. There's like a shop on the train that you can buy stuff from. There's a guy on the train that welds your capsule fragments together. And it's just a really good tune. You can spend some time on the train. Very different from the rest of the tunes, much more like one note, 8-bit, 16-bit type theme. And I loved it. I thought it was a really good tune. So a lot of the soundtrack actually really reminds me of Metroid. How in Metroid there is a very haunting undertone that is very atmospheric with what's going on.
Right.
It doesn't come anywhere near to Super Metroid's soundtrack, of course, like in terms of quality, but it is definitely an homage to that. I feel like, especially that's something that this game did both of, right? It definitely borrowed a lot of things from Hollow Knight and a few things from Metroid to kind of create this experience. So any questions you have, Josh, before we put it on the quest log?
I think you summed it up pretty well. I would say, like, I don't know, like this one would be, to me, just from your description, I'm just going to predict what you're going to say, but I don't know, maybe I'm completely wrong. I think you're going to side quest it because it's like, it's a solid experience, but like, Yeah, like it seems like you enjoyed it, but you're not like super hot on it. But I could be wrong. So what is your verdict there?
So I really wanted to toe that line because that was my feeling towards this game for the entirety of me playing it. And actually, I reached out to our buddy who has been on this show before, Ross Rango, because I knew that he had played Haiku before and asked his opinion because I was so torn on where to put it. And I won't say where he said he'd put it, but I just want everyone to know how difficult it was for me to place this. I am going to put it on the main quest, though.
Oh, I'm surprised. What made you lean that direction?
Mostly because I love Hollow Knight. It's probably a top 5 game for me.
Right.
This game does so much of what Hollow Knight does, and not necessarily all of it is better. I would say that they achieved their goal of doing that, though. They really
it's another
did a
one
good
of
job.
those. Right?
Yes, yes. And I cannot knock a game for not being original, or else I feel like a hypocrite, because just last episode we had a discussion about that, right? A lot about inspirations and things. And I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say, well, this game's too much like a game that I love dearly, so I'm going to give it a side quest. No, honestly, what I'm going to say is, anybody listening, I kind of already explained about if you bounce off a Hollow Knight but enjoyed the gameplay and it was too difficult, Haiku's good for you. Anybody who enjoyed Hollow Knight at all, honestly, who enjoys Metroidvanias at all, would like this game. For sure. 100%. And I just can't put it on the side quest because it achieves what it set out to do extremely well. It is a fairly tight experience. Lots of these games take well over 10 hours to complete. I beat this one in just under 8. So
that's not bad at all.
No, it's a pretty short experience. And I guess the one detraction, and part of the reason why I was like, maybe I should side quest this, the value is not extremely good. It's a $20 game, but I got it on sale for about $13, and I think that is the perfect price if you're getting it on sale, and I think it's probably on sale pretty regularly. That sale price is just perfect to keep it on the main quest. The gameplay is extremely good, and that's part of the reason I can't be like, oh man, this game's really, really good, but it's just too much like a game that I love. Like that to me, that makes no sense. Like I love this other game, and this game is very similar to it. So yeah, I love this game too, and I do. Like it's very charming, and frankly, we don't know when Silk Song is coming. So for anybody listening to this right now, and you want more Hollow Knight,
you're itching, right?
Haiku is the perfect, especially if there are poly killers listening, right? Not an overly long game. Pick it up. I definitely recommend it.
Awesome. I think you sold me on it, at least after I beat Hollow Knight. I think like that would be the order for me, is Hollow Knight, then that, if I want more.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely, I think it's a very slick looking game too, like graphically and animation wise. So yeah, I think that's awesome. So we got 2 main quests this time. We got my friend Pedro and Haiku the Robot, which I think those both ended up being kind of fun, different style platforming games, which is awesome with indie games. There's platforming games, but there's like 70 different versions of platforming games. So it's always cool to highlight some that maybe people haven't heard about.
For sure. And I am excited. Cannot wait to check out the game that you brought as well, because it's right up my alley. So
yeah. Well, I think that's it for the episode. Nice, short and sweet episode here, which is good. I think nice little hour is perfect for somebody. I feel like we've been doing like long episodes lately, so I don't know, maybe not. It's hard to tell. I'm just having a good time either way. So, let's do some plugs. You can find the show on Twitter, as long as Twitter's a platform, at IndieQuest Pod, or you can send us an email, comment, concern, whatever you want to talk about. Send us an email, as long as it's not anything derogatory or horrible, we'll read it on the show. It's IndieQuestPod@gmail.com. And Seth, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at Captain Drachma on Twitter and, of course, in the Polymedia Discord, best place on the internet. Where can they find you, Josh?
At Frantic Society on Twitter, and also hanging out in that Discord, just talking about whatever. It's always a good... Honestly, I feel like the Discord is one of my favorite outlets if you have almost anything on your mind. And there's usually somebody who will have a conversation with you about any random thought you have, which for me is perfect. So it's definitely recommended.
It's not only for video games. We talk, honestly, video games might be 10% of anything that we talk about on there, which I love.
Yeah, and if you guys like Marvel Snap, come and talk to me about Marvel Snap, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one in that channel. So anyway, yeah, you can find, speaking of the Discord, Polykill. It's one of the shows on the network, the Polymedia Network, where Steve and Trav talk about beating video games. I just jumped right into those plugs. I don't know. That was a really messy transition. But anyway, of course, with that show, Steve is taking a break from content creation because he's a dad now, which is awesome. And last episode, they had his nemesis on there and his predecessor on there. So I would say give that one a listen if you like classic Polykill. I would say that was a really solid episode.
Oh, yeah. I loved it. My favorite part made me all fuzzy and nostalgic, even though it was only a couple years ago, but the outro was so good. I love that.
Yeah, it's just a nice little touch, right?
Yes, for sure.
All right. What's a show on the network or an episode of a show on network you want to shout out?
I will shout out Tales of Lesser Medium, because they are just now releasing another, I believe, the beginning of a new series. And it's only on Patreon right now, but I'm assuming it's coming, I think anyway, but I'm assuming it's coming to everything soon if it hasn't already, and that is for Shenmue. So I am extremely excited to listen to that, because those two guys make everything funny, and I imagine that will be hilarious.
I mean, Shenmue already kind of is a funny game. They're not trying to be funny, right? But it kind of already is. So just take that and then add their flavor to it. It's going to be pretty incredible. So
for sure.
Yeah, we have all sorts of awesome shows on the network. We have a brand new horror movie podcast called Split Up. We have PD and Pam sitting down, having a drink and talking about their favorite media and Point and Drink Adventures. We have all sorts of awesome shows on Polymedia. So go over to the website, polymedianetwork.com. Check out a podcast, just kind of peruse around, see if anything catches your interest. I think there's something for everybody on the network, so that's awesome. Also, if you guys want to comment about the show, you can go over to Reddit. It's /Polymedia on Reddit. I'm very bad at Reddit, so I think that's what you do, r/Polymedia, right? Yeah.
Yeah, r/Polymedia.
I feel like every time I talk about Reddit, I feel like the geriatric old man, because I just never use Reddit really that much. So anyway,
see, to me, I almost feel like Reddit is a social media platform for older people in a way. Like there's not a whole lot of kids on Reddit. I feel like that's more TikTok and maybe even Instagram. I don't use Instagram at all either, but I don't know.
Yeah, we're just a couple of millennials just trying to get by here, right? So that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, why don't you go ahead and close out with some kind words to the awesome people out there for this episode?
Yeah, for sure. So I think if my quest log placement of my game has anything to say, it is that you should not judge a book by its cover. Just because a book seems to be just taking an idea from another book or a great author does not necessarily mean it's going to not be a great thing on its own. So try things because you like them and not necessarily because of what their inspirations were. Thanks, everybody.
Peace.